Welcome, ABPD. As individual contractors, we believe that the advances in technology will be of service to you in tracking down suspects involved in the number of robberies that have been occurring here in Albuquerque. We would like to show you the advances in DNA analysis technology that has helped track down suspects and solve crimes. First, let's take a look at what DNA is. DNA is short for deoxyribonucleic acid. DNA has been one of the most significant advances in technology when tracking down criminals. The use of DNA was introduced in 1986 in the United States by Kary Mullis. He discovered no one has the same DNA. Saliva, skin tissue, blood, hair, semen, fingerprints, fingernails, and teeth are all forms of DNA that can be retrieved at crime scenes.
Variations can identify an individual as uniquely as a fingerprint.
The first case in the United States to be solved by using DNA obtained from a crime scene was in 1987 in Orange County, Florida. A man named Tommy Lee had his blood found at a crime scene, which got ran through the database from previous collected samples, finding him guilty of rape and murder.
The criminal justice system is kind of surprising, the small amount of DNA that is needed to obtain a result.
Sometime in the 1980s, the federal government set up a system of national, state, and local DNA profiles. All 50 states have passed DNA legislations giving permission to obtain DNA profiles for convicted offenders. Every state has a DNA database, which share information of what DNA they have with each other. That system is known as CODIS, which is a combined DNA index system. CODIS is a computer software system that compares and exchanges DNA electronically, which can link criminal crimes to other criminal crimes in other nations, state, and local areas. DNA helps the police, prosecutors, defense counsel, and court to be more accurate when making decisions on whether one is guilty or wrongfully accused of a crime. It helps two types of cases, non-criminal and criminal cases. Non-criminal, by using DNA as a means of testing immigration or child support. Criminal cases, DNA helps prove one is the suspect to a crime. DNA is much faster and more efficient than previous convictions.
As valuable as it may be in prosecuting crime, it's DNA's ability to rule out suspects that holds the most power.
Due to technology advances, cases that have gone cold can be reopened and solved. Retaining DNA has solved cases involving rape, sexual assault, robbery, and homicide. In Virginia Beach, a case was solved after being closed over 30 years ago. Two men by the names of Carville Feller and Charles Williams Jr. were charged with one count of rape. DNA that was obtained at the crime scene was resubmitted into the lab to test with the updated technology advances. In Virginia, Alberto Barriera was serving a sentence of 7 years on state narcotic charges. He will then be transferred over to New York to serve another term for rape charges in the first degree after his DNA barely got into the national database this year. If New York would have passed a law sooner, which allows DNA to be collected upon all convictions, then they would have been able to charge him years earlier. This helps support that DNA technological advances, such as sharing information on what DNA has been collected, would have made the process of convicting criminals a lot easier and earlier. In Jackson County in Kansas City, Jeffrey Ford was charged with robbery through the use of DNA. Ford gave a lady a ride home and was accused by the woman of rape and robbery. Ford admitted to robbing the woman after she went to the police. The DNA supported his claim and was then convicted of robbery with the rape charges against him dropped. Another case involving a young man charged to 15 years in prison for robbing a store clerk in a tobacco shop with a gun. DNA was the key piece in solving this crime. He dropped his hat while running away. This contained sweat that had his DNA on it.
Brandished a firearm at the clerk and when he looked inside and saw some male subjects inside the store, he fled the scene. Not before dropping his hat, which turned out to hold the key piece of evidence.
DNA evidence helps police solve cold cases. A 17-year-old woman was found dead near her Salt Lake City home. They had suspicion it was the convicted man named Joseph Simpson, but needed more evidence. Because the case happened 18 years ago, the DNA they obtained from him over 18 years ago was not able to fully find him guilty. They had overwhelming evidence of DNA from the crime scene that could be used.
But with DNA advancements, the help of the state crime lab and other agencies, hardly, after well over a decade, a break. The suspect's DNA was on those river rocks. Police say it was Joseph Simpson, a paroled convicted murderer.
Detectives had to follow him around until they found DNA off a drink or napkin at a restaurant that could be used to accuse him. Eventually, they found a cigarette which contained his DNA and was able to convict him.
71-year-old Flora Rundle was found fatally stabbed inside of her home back in 1989. Last year, Unified Police reopened the case.
Flora Rundle, a 70-year-old woman, was found in her house raped and stabbed to death. The police department got a grant which allowed them to reopen the case using new technological advances on the DNA collected at the crime scene. DNA provided from the tech convicted 56-year-old Gary Hilfiger, who was her taxi driver on multiple occasions.
Now, through DNA collected from Rundle's body, police connected 56-year-old Gary Hilfiger, to the crime. He's already serving time at the Utah State Prison for another homicide.
Most crimes committed will contain some type of evidence. Whether it is skin tissue, saliva, fingernails, or blood, DNA will be left behind. Technological advances in DNA has helped make a difference in how the criminal justice system works. The use of technology has made DNA the #1 component in catching criminals, and technology has made it the most efficient way and fastest way to find answers. It is now up to you, ABPD, to use this information to solve the robberies occurring in Albuquerque. Thank you and have a wonderful day.